And you all thought this was leading into a Sonic Adventure 2 review. Fooled ya. I did promise that I was going to get around to reviewing Silent Hill 2 Born from a Wish at some point, so here we go. For those of you wondering, yes, a Sonic Adventure 2 review is in the works, but to lay my cards flat out on the table here, the script be a lengthy beast, and might just end up being one of the longest reviews I've ever done.
I'm sorry. I didn't know.
So, Solidus needed a crash mat, I was playing through Silent Hill 2 at the time, and thus I figured I'd scratch one monkey off my back, as well as covering some of the aspects of Silent Hill 2 that I neglected to mention back in Season 4. While this review might be a little on the short side for completion's sake, as well as diving into the less talked about side dish to the main course that is a letter from Silent Heaven, let's take a look at some development history. Back in 2002, Silent Hill went multi-plat for the PC and Xbox alongside its PlayStation 2 counterpart, and in these ports came a little something extra, which we know today as Born from a Wish, including 2 new alternate endings for the main game. These of course being the UFO and dog endings initially not included in the original PS2 release. Details are scarce on the specifics of Born from a Wish's conception and development cycle, but since this was being worked on in tandem with the original game, we're all working with the same cast, same developers, and as such, we have Team Silent's magical touch on a smaller scale side story. Try saying that 3 times drunk. Regardless, while Silent Hill 2 is mainly regaled as being an emotionally charged masterpiece in terms of its plot, Born from a Wish on the other hand is markedly more occultic in terms of its direction, echoing its roots of Silent Hill 1. Since the story will probably take up the largest chunk of this review, let's take a look at some gameplay. At the risk of copying and pasting previous scripts, let me summarize it in brief for those of you on the cheap seats. Tank controls, fixed camera angles, readying your weapon and firing away, all swift, silky, and responsive as they are in the Prime game. This, alongside Team Silent's immaculate ability to guide players to where they need to go, with a camera angle shift here, a visibly distinct item there, and Maria turning her head everywhere! That there's a point of something important for you to inspect. I mean, it's practically Silent Hill 2's gameplay beat for beat, which in and of itself is fantastic, and still holds up with its ease of accessibility in spite of what some may mislead you to believe in regards to people's ever-growing fear of tank controls.
Oh, I didn't know that.
The only notable exceptions to the norm here being no flashlight or radio, which isn't something as sorely missed as you might think. For one thing, Maria will immediately turn her head to face a monster if it's in her vicinity, the creatures all make their distinctive noises so you can sense their presence, and Akira Yamaoka's soundtrack will make damn sure that you know they're getting close, as it skewers you with some skin-piercing industrial screams. In regards to the flashlight, when you're not running through the town itself still in daylight, the Baldwin Mansion is still fairly well lit enough so you can read your maps, and as such the flashlight's absence is manageable. Or to put it another way, just think like the flashlight is going on holiday to South Ashfield, you know, it's renting out an apartment room in 302 and is... Oh. Well, that explains its absence in Silent Hill 4. Another absence in mechanical terms would be the removal of the riddle difficulty, this time only relegating you to beginner, easy, normal, and hard mode, as far as your skill level is concerned. Not that it really matters anyway, with Born from a Wish's one puzzle that Team Silent knew for a fact would be all they could spare for this mode, since they simultaneously made it easy to solve for future playthroughs, as they did made it incredibly obtuse and frustrating if you haven't played the game in a while.
I'm sorry.
The graveyard board puzzle works by placing a red, then black, then white board, with the red going first, the black board going 90 degrees to the right, and then the white board also going 90 degrees to the right. Make sure you jot this down, by the way, because it will be on the test. By which I mean if you ever want to solve this puzzle with ease, then yeah, be sure to note this down, because it is fucking annoying. It's not particularly difficult since there are only a finite amount of solutions, but unlike a game such as Primal for instance, where lateral thinking falls naturally into the game's design, it feels satisfying to have an aha moment once you figure things out, but instead the puzzle here hits with the impact of a wet towel tacitly thrown on the floor, rather than the visceral weight of a little girl falling to her death out of an attic window like in the main game. Don't think about that one too much. I swear to God I'm not psychotic. Well, onto things that Born from a Wish does nail down as accurately as its forebearers is the search and exploration elements. Your route's clearly labelled from what's open, where you've been, what you've done, which doors are locked or broken. The navigation is well laid out and methodical, and items as listed before are all clearly distinguished from the background elements, with your instructions clearly laid out by proxy of the game's mission structure. However, since we're dealing with a smaller scale here, area traversal is pretty swift. Your main area of focus being the Baldwin Mansion, which you can zip across as if you were trying out for a position on STAR's Alpha Team. Of course, you do visit Heaven's Night and the part of the town with Blockhaven Hospital. No, seriously, next time you boot up Silent Hill 2, look at the logo of the hospital building and it literally says Blockhaven Hospital. And of course, a few rooms in the Blue Creek apartments for some white liquid. You might be thinking that Maria's about to put on a show with that white liquid, but to put things into perspective here, it's not that kind of white liquid.
Stop it. You're disturbing me.
Adding on to the limited scope would be the enemies, only the lying figure, mannequin and bugs coming out to play, and they're about as threatening as you'd expect. Just blast away and give them the good old Silent Hill stomp for good measure. I mean, when it comes down to it, the overall gameplay experience of Born from a Wish simply does. And if you're looking for more of what you loved in the main game, then Maria's side story has got you covered. While lacking in its one puzzle, the rest of the experience holds up to scrutiny and makes for a nice bite-sized expansion to the Silent Hill 2 experience. Length may be an issue for some, since a first playthrough may take you about an hour to complete, although then again if you're an expert at this game and Silent Hill's machinations, you should be able to complete this by the time it takes to order a pizza. Over to the technical aspects, production values are about on par with the original game, from the animation to the voice work, the music. Honestly, Team Silent did an excellent job in trying to make sure everything felt unique whilst working within their limitations. In terms of music, Akira Yamaoka uses specifically composed pieces for the cutscenes, with the main horror track recreating that tense anxiety that I loved in Silent Hill 1's soundtrack. And as for atmospheric tracks, Morning Calm is by far one of my absolute favourite soundtracks in the entire series. The only examples of music and asset reuse are mainly being seen in the town and Blue Creek apartments, but even then, you're never there for long enough for it to start dragging its feet in terms of pace. Continuing the trend of giving the middle finger to diminishing returns is the voice cast, with all three voice actors we have in this little piece putting in fantastic performances. Monica Horgan-Taylor returns as Maria, delivering a performance that captures the directionless fear of isolation and the desire to find purpose in a meaningless existence, doing well to help highlight a side of Maria left unexplored when she had her arms wrapped firmly around James Sunderland as her sole reason to live. And for our two newcomers, first up we have Ward E. Sexton voicing the lonesome Ernest Baldwin. Ward E. Sexton might not be a dude you'll know by name, but you'll definitely know him by voice. Particularly with this iconic intro.
Resident Evil.
Yeah, that was him. With a strong script and excellent direction, Ward perfectly suits the demeanor Ernest presents, developing him with a nice arc that plays out over the course of the story and makes great use of the screen time he's got. Florence Minoa, much in the same way as Sandra Wayne from Silent Hill 1, only has a few lines to speak of, but she gives a good enough delivery as Amy Baldwin to ensure that her voice work wasn't wasted. But this is all just beating around the bush really, so let's dive into the story and traverse the realm of Maria's psyche. The plot kicks off around about the point where James has already wandered into town, but in terms of Maria, she's sitting alone in Heaven's Night contemplating suicide. Lost, alone and afraid to die, the cold metal of the revolver resting in her hands, Maria, much like Rent Boy, chooses life and decides to venture out in search of another living soul in the town of Silent Hill. It's here where we see Maria under more melancholy circumstances, where she doesn't quite know herself, at least not to the extent that we see in the main game. There's nowhere of floaty confidence or graceful wiles here, and it plays quite well into Silent Hill 2's somber tone that does make one wonder what life is like for someone of her very unique circumstances. Eventually making her way into the Baldwin Mansion, after spelunking through an estate that looks like it hasn't been dusted for over a decade, Maria soon stumbles upon one Ernest Baldwin. The owner of this here residence of evil that simply wants Maria to go away while he stews in his grief, locking the door and then showing us a broken man who has nothing to live for. Obeying his wishes, Maria turns and leaves before a bang emanates from the lounge room fireplace, leading up to a small grave with an Arcadia key leading Maria to a child's bedroom, where if you care to examine the teddy bear, gifts us with a small remark about how Laura loved playing with teddy bears. Even though, by all accounts, Maria shouldn't know who Laura is. Oh, and by the way, for Skully's fun fact of the week, in earlier stages of Silent Hill 2's development process, teddy bears were initially an enemy type in Silent Hill 2, spotted around the Woodside apartments where Angela's cutscene would take place. Their symbolism likely implying that they would have belonged to Angela Orozco, and her desire to cling on to an innocence long since lost by the likes of her father. Which really makes this one scene where this happens to James all the funnier.
Ow.
What's wrong?
I just pricked myself.
Are you okay?
Yeah.
In any case, eventually finding her way up to the attic, the distant voices of people gathering around an accident can be heard, as all that Maria finds up in the empty storage space is a birthday card missing an envelope. As Maria turns to leave, she can faintly hear Amy's last wish to have her card gifted to her grieving father. When confronted about Amy's death, Ernest confides in Maria that 10 years ago Amy had fallen from the attic window and died holding the empty envelope.
Oh no, she fell out the window! Don't move her!
What happened?
Never knowing why all this happened and stricken with grief, Ernest locked himself away from the rest of the world inside his lonely mansion. We never see a wife around, so whether or not it's that she left Ernest or died prior to Amy's death, it's likely that Amy was all the company that Ernest had left, and to that effect it makes this scene all the more heartbreaking to see Ernest's emotions pouring out from him.
Oh. What a fool. Now, when it's too late, I finally understand why. Why she was there. Why she was holding that empty envelope when she fell.
Adding on to how in a later segment we can see some graffiti chiding Ernest's house as a haunted mansion, and it gives us all the context we need to know that whether rumors spread based on Amy's death or by Ernest locking himself away from the rest of the world, he still lives on a broken man. But as Silent Hill has taught us, broken men have only so far to fall, and as such he requests Maria to bring him some white liquid. No, not that white liquid, get your mind out of the gutter.
You make me sick!
Seemingly coming to an epiphany about what Maria is, after she returns with the white liquid, the two begin to discuss a bit of philosophy, Ernest asking whether or not she believes in fate, and of course God. And it's here where it all comes together, doubly so if you've been examining the paraphernalia around Ernest's house. While he might not have been a member of the cult per se, Ernest, it seems, does have a vested interest in his religious beliefs, particularly that of the rebirth ritual that James can perform in one of his endings, including the usage of the white liquid. Ernest was so desperate to bring Amy back that he sought to complete the ritual, but as implied by his dialogue, he was no longer physically able to do it, and as such, passed away still in agony over his daughter's death. Hence why he sent Maria over to get the last thing he needed to complete that ritual. Though, for as faithful as he was, even he had his doubts about whether or not the ritual would actually work in resurrecting his dead daughter. However, what Ernest does know for certain is the nature of Silent Hill, its connection to the old gods, and most prevalently, Maria's true nature. He warns her about James Sunderland, knowing of his crimes and informing her that she was born of James's ideal of what he wanted Mary to be. However, with the name ringing familiar on the tip of her tongue, Maria, trance-like in her delivery, cuts her exchange short, opening the door to an empty room where, as Ernest had stated earlier, there is nobody. In the aftermath, Maria wanders around Silent Hill, pressing the gun to her temple before ultimately rejecting suicide and accepting her role in things to come, pressing onward to Rosewater Park to ultimately play her part in James's story, ending with their first encounter. And so with the story taken care of, let's dig into my final thoughts on Silent Hill 2 Born from a Wish. All in all, it's a sweet little package, nicely wrapped up in some excellent presentation with the Team Silent seal of quality to it. The gameplay is more of what you loved, the technical aspects are majorly solid for a simple side story, and the plot itself is small, but gives plenty of moments to give one pause for thought about the nature of existence when looking at things from the perspective of one of Silent Hill's machinations. They're born from the subconscious, given power by the town's spiritual essence, and the old gods of Silent Hill are very much alive both in the town's culture and in its people. Born from a Wish gets that, and arcs itself perfectly with the subplots in regards to Ernest and Maria's character arcs throughout. So in summary, simple, solid, and well worth playing if you're looking for an extra Silent Hill 2 fix. So on that note, I am Solidus Skully, keeping new metal, and if you'll excuse me, it's my dad's birthday coming up, and I gotta give him his birthday card up on the roof. Since I won't have the chance to mention this anywhere else, it seems that Eddie was also going to have some cult monsters exclusive to him through these floating naked bodies, that from the looks of things were there to reflect his weight issues and the perfect masculine figure that he's failed to live up to. Which is a pain I know all too well! In the aftermath, Maria...
Is it really necessary for me to answer all your tedious questions?
Yes.
Get your mind out of the gutter! It's gonna cut them up like butter! Homie? Jesus Christ. This is what happens when I try and act cool. I become the very opposite of cool. I become hot. But not the kind of hot that gets all the ladies and the dudes. I just become lonely. Like Maria and Ernest.